Næst langar mig að kynna Katie Hoare. Hún bóndi á Trenance Dairy sem hérna fjölskyldubú. Þetta svona 100 kúa bú. Með jörð upp á rúma 50 hektara, eru aðallega í framleiðslu á mjólkurafurðum í suðvestur Bretlandi í Cornwall. Þetta eru verðlaunabændur og þau hafa verið að nýta þessa tækni og þetta svona reynslusaga sem að Katie ætlar að deila hérna með okkur. Katie, may I ask you to step in and tell us about, tell us your story, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hopefully you can all hear me. So I am a dairy farmer from Cornwall, which is in the bottom of the UK. And I was lucky enough to be one of the early adopters of the Benneman system, which Andrew just explained earlier. So we are a rented farm and we supply all of our milk to Arla. And as previously mentioned, Arla have had quite a big push for sustainability and being able to sell their milk on to supermarkets to reduce Scope 3 emissions and such like. So we took on our tenancy in January 2018. Very naive, very innocent to the whole dairy world. We were just going to play with some cows and play with a slurry and it was all going to be lovely and rosy. It didn't quite work out like that. Turns out managing slurry is quite a big task. We didn't have many cows in the beginning, but as the dairy grew and we bred our own replacements, and slurry was obviously going to be one of our biggest sticking points. Using it, harvesting it, maintaining it was all going to be a big uphill battle. We had no infrastructure on the farm. We came across Bennemans through an event, and we spoke to Chris and we said, look, we need something on farm. You need somebody to help sort of devise your system and see if it's going to roll out and work on farm. And the two of us kind of came up with the plan that we were going to have a trial AD lagoon here on the farm. And that's kind of how it all started for us, really. We had about 50 cows at the time, I suppose, and we weren't really sure if the whole Benneman system was going to work for us on the farm. So we said, it's a really small scale. We're a small family farm. We don't have loads of infrastructure. We don't have loads of output. We don't have loads of input. So it was quite a good test to see if the Benneman system could work. So we installed a Benneman's lagoon. It's 45-degree angled slurry lagoon, all built out of earth, and it's 6 meters to the bottom. And we did it under the nitrate vulnerable zone requirements. So those stipulated that for 120 cows, you needed to be able to store that slurry from 120 cows for 5 months of the year. So we made the lagoon the correct size to be able to store that amount of slurry. And then we did upscale the cows to be able to fill the lagoon with that amount of slurry. During all this process, CNH became part of Benneman's, and obviously the New Holland tractor became, quite a prominent feature. Obviously we had the slurry, we had the methane technology on the farm, New Holland had the tractor. It kind of seemed a hand-in-hand opportunity for us to trial a New Holland tractor. So all the sort of the workings for the lagoon and all of that was working. We were harvesting gas. It wasn't an easy road. It wasn't a straightforward process. There was lots of issues, including topography and wind loading and rain. We get quite a lot of rain in Cornwall. So there was quite a few hurdles to overcome with the slurry lagoon that Andrew showed in one of his previous slides with the cover over the top. There was quite a few issues. We managed to overcome all of those, and we were actually harvesting fugitive methane from cow poo. And it was a pretty cool moment when we were able to switch the machines on, push all the slurry into the lagoon and harvest methane. It was pretty mind-blowing to think that a small farm in the middle of Cornwall could produce something like that. We ran John Deere tractors previous to that. My husband was a John Deere man. He was adamant that the John Deere Green was the way we had to go, which was fine. So when the opportunity came to trial a blue New Holland T6 180, he was quite adamant that it was not going to work in a month Sundays. No tractor can survive running solely on cow poo. It's going to be a waste of time. So we had the tractor basically to see if it was going to cope with what we needed it to do. A bit like Andrew mentioned with Nick on his dairy farm. It wasn't like a contracting business. It was to be used twice a day for feeding and moving silage. And then through the summer months, there was silage opportunities and, slightly different work. But it was here to work. And much to my husband's disgust, it did everything that it said on the tin. And for 12, well, nearly 18 months, I suppose, we solely ran the farm on cow poo. Nothing else. We had a little bit of diesel for the scrape tractor and the hander, but like the majority of the work on our farm was done using the methane produced from our cows. And it was incredible. Like there was no smell on the farm because it was all harnessed under the cover. Everything that came out of the cow went into the lagoon. All of that was then utilised and put back into the tractor. We did all our work with the tractor. It was just a bonkers system that everything we did was completely circular. The only things that I exported from the farm was milk from the cows. The digestate or the slurry that was left in the lagoon, all of that was put out onto the grazing ground for the cows and the silage ground. We don't grow any crops. We just grow grass. And the grass growth was phenomenal. We had the best silage I think we've ever had. We'd done a lot of soil sampling previous to the lagoon and previous to the digestate being applied. So we had quite a good handle on where our ground was and at what levels we were at. And when we sampled the slurry, it became pretty clear that we did not need to then buy any artificial fertilizers because what we had storing it in that warm environment under a cover was enough to give the ground exactly what it needed. We also had a flow rate monitor on the slurry tanker, so we could apply exactly what we needed, when we needed, how we needed to the right area. So we weren't wasting anything. So we cut our artificial fertilizer bill was cut by about 55%. We drastically reduced that. It was bonkers, really. And we're still not using much fertilizer now. We've actually just started using foliar feeding to kind of enhance the slurry a little bit more. So we reduced that, and then we had 18 months of no diesel, and our carbon footprint. We started our carbon footprint journey with Farm Carbon Toolkit. We sort of sat around 400 tons of CO2 per litre of milk. Then we grew the cow numbers as the slurry infrastructure increased. We were growing better forage. We were able to keep more cattle on the ground that we had. So as our stocking numbers increased, obviously our carbon footprint, everything went up. And I think at peak, we were around sort of 900 tons of CO2 per kilo of fat and protein corrected milk that left the farm, which, it sounds pretty bad, but in the whole dairy world, it wasn't horrific. 12 months after doing the lagoon and all the savings that we had with that, we had our Farm Carbon Toolkit came out and they did all the calculations on everything, and they worked out that our Farm Carbon Toolkit was reduced from 900 to 87 tons of CO2 per every kilo of fat and protein corrected milk that left the farm. And we were all flabbergasted that just doing something so simple as utilising our slurry could have such a massive impact on the rest of the farm. We weren't having to worry about diesel, we weren't having to worry about fertiliser. Everything that we were doing was already on the farm. We were just making better usage of it. And the tractor was a complete game changer. Like, it did everything that we needed it to do, to the point where we actually sold the John Deere tractor, much to my husband's disgust. But we just weren't using it. We just didn't need that tractor as well as the New Holland. So yeah, we ran that project for nearly 4 years, I guess. being completely circular. And it was an incredible journey. We were incredibly lucky to be part of, well, we were the first farm with Benhamans to trial the system, and it is something that we have really enjoyed, and it really opened our eyes on how such a circular system can be so efficient, and the knock-on effects of having that within the farm has meant we've got better wildlife, we've got better soil structure, we've got better sequestration, we've got better carbon storage. And it just, it's bonkers, isn't it, how a few simple elements can make such a huge difference to the whole farm. It was an unfortunate sort of turn of events that we couldn't continue with the project. The licensing and everything just didn't lend itself, that once the trial finished, we weren't able to keep the cover on. But I mean, we've been lobbying with the MPs and stuff to try and get some more funding and some more licensing in place, because if you think about how many UK dairy farms we have, if all of those dairy farms could implement this system without the need for an AD plant, we can keep our slurry in that storage lagoon forever. We've probably got slurry in the bottom of that lagoon that went in 2018. An AD plant, you put it in, you harness it, you process it for 30 days, it's extracted, you start again. We don't have that here. We can keep slurry in there forever, and keep it moving and working, and it's not ever going to stop. Yes, like Andrew said, in the summer months it's harder work because the cows are out grazing, so obviously they're taking their manure with them, they're not leaving it in the yards. But it's surprising how much manure you have morning and afternoon milkings. It was enough to keep the process going. But unfortunately there was not the funding or the licensing there in place to be able to keep us doing what we were doing. And it seems like such a wasted opportunity that government and policies aren't behind us in promoting what we do, because we are incredible carbon sinks, and the cow is the most efficient recycling animal there is. She literally gives us everything and more in return for not a whole lot really. So yeah, the system has been incredible, and there are so many opportunities with it, and as a small farm it meant that we could concentrate on what was important, and that was the soil, the ground, and the cows. That's what pays my rent every month, that's what keeps a roof over our head, that's what's driving the business forward. And without having to have all those extra inputs and chasing all those extra inputs like fertilizer and diesel, and it meant that we could concentrate on the actual business itself, and dare I say, have a bit of a work-life balance. It was just a whole package, and it all sounds very twee and lovely, but it really did make a huge difference to our farming system, having that covered lagoon and utilizing the slurry. I think the first winter we had it, we were quite aware of how much rainwater was falling onto it, so we installed some storage tanks. The following spring we managed to save 119 tanker loads of slurry from going out, because of the water that we'd saved from going into the pit meant the tanker was not doing as many trips, which was quite unbelievable, because yes, it rains, but I don't think we'd really appreciated how much rain was in the slurry previously to water it down, if you like. And it is just slurry that goes in there, so there's no food waste, no silage, so it is wet, and it does keep itself moving within the pit. So it goes in at about 14% dry matter, and it was coming out at about 4%. So it was incredibly usable, and we could put it out on the fields with a trailing shoe system. So yeah, you could sort of see where the lines had been, but within 10 days to 2 weeks it had gone, and you could graze it. I probably wouldn't tell Arla that I was doing that, but it was kind of dissipated enough that you could go back out and graze it. So yeah, I think people were a bit concerned at having a cover over your slurry, and oh my goodness, it's going to get really thick and you're not going to be able to do anything with it. And but to be fair, it was fine. It did all work. It did all work really well. So yeah, for us, it's been quite an incredible journey, and it's definitely opened our eyes to a different way of farming that perhaps my parents had, and even the next door neighbours have got. They all thought we were kind of bonkers, but now they can see the benefits. You know, in spring when our fields are beautifully green and we've got grass flowing, and they're still struggling to get out with a fert spreader, and it's all looking a bit yellow and a bit tinged over their side of the hedge. They're like, you know, maybe that old slurry system does work after all, because you know we've got lovely green grass all year round. We're incredibly lucky. So yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? You never quite. I don't think any of us really appreciate the power of our slurry and how much it does for us. Most farmers that you speak to think of it as a massive headache, and it is a massive headache. But if you can handle it and utilize it and harness it, gosh, it can really, really work for you. Really work for you. Thank you. I think that's about me done, is it?
Great. Thank you so much, Katie, for sharing your experiences with the Bennamann equipment and your slurry lagoon.